Hey, what's up, guys? Blaine Duncan here from Halloween Lives, the podcast of Michael Myers. This is episode number 36, your weekly source for Halloween franchise news. Your only podcast out there doing this, 100% Michael Myers, 100% of the time. And riding shotgun, as always, is my brother, my partner in crime, and everything in between. What's up, Austin? How you doing this week?
Dude, I am doing good. Really fun last couple of weeks that we've had on the pod. We've had 3 episodes in the last 2 weeks, and it's just good keeping that momentum going. Thanks to everybody who's been liking and subscribing. We have a ton of new subscribers. So thank you. Welcome aboard. We'll do our best to keep earning your attention.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you to everybody who is supporting the podcast right now. As always, we got to mention that SpookHouseStudios.com is the official sponsor of this show. Right now, they have a 10% off discount on their products. If you go to SpookHouseStudios.com and use Halloween Lives at checkout, use that code Halloween Lives at checkout, get 10% off your order. Go support them, support us, and everybody wins. So, yeah, dude, I couldn't agree more. We've had some awesome episodes the last few weeks. Last week, we had on Marie, who was fantastic, and we had some really good conversations about Halloween Ends, and that's kind of what we're going to focus on a little bit tonight. The episode is going to be about what the differences are between the Halloween Ends novelization and the actual, there you go, and the film that you see on the screen. But before we get to that, I do want to give a little pat on the back to my brother who's sitting here because he just did something really cool for somebody that we're a big fan of. And Austin, I'm going to let you explain it because, dude, congrats to you. What an awesome opportunity and honor for you to be a part of this. But let the folks at home know what you did.
So obviously, friend of this show, Dominic Benoit, is the director of Halloween Stocks. And on Live 25, we actually got some news, breaking news on the show that a sequel had been confirmed. And so pretty much right after Live 25, I reached out to Dominic. A lot of what I do is in the graphic design sphere. Everything you see around us right now was me on Photoshop and the intro and everything. And I said, hey, here's some of the stuff I've done. If I could even have my fingerprint on this project, I would be thrilled. I would be happy, whatever. It was because I love the first one so much and because I believe in him so much. I just wanted to have the tiniest bit in this whole thing. And so I am proud to show off the Halloween Stocks 2 logo. This is the official logo for the film that I designed with Dominic's words of encouragement and inspiration. He does have a synopsis posted. I'm going to read it really quick here. When a ghostly figure shows up at their door late at night on Halloween, a mother and her young son are thrown into a cruel game of cat and mouse. As the stalker wreaks havoc, their fight for survival unveils a terrifying truth. The boogeyman is real. So, yeah, that's Halloween Stocks 2. Coming to a YouTube near you in the next few months. They're really rolling on pre-production here. There's going to be a GoFundMe, and we will be sure to shout that out on the podcast as well. If you saw Stocks and you know what this guy's capable of, this movie is ramping it up to an entire another level. I know way too much that I can't share. Needless to say, it is worthy of that Stocks title and is a great sequel to the original.
Absolutely. Guys, if you have not seen the original Halloween Stocks that's on YouTube right now, you need to go do that. Do yourself a favor. It's literally the best Halloween fan film that I have ever seen. It's so well done. Production quality, cinematography, the score. I mean, everything is just so great. So go give Dominic some love. Go support Halloween Stocks and support Halloween Stocks 2 as he tries to raise money for it. And it's one of those things where we don't know where the real Halloween franchise is going. So if you want to have this thing continue on, you're going to have to maybe support some of these smaller indie filmmakers. And Dominic's the perfect dude to do it. We've had him on the show a couple of times, and we'll have him on again. Go support him. Great guy, great film, and a great filmmaker. So yeah, check out Halloween Stocks on YouTube. Trust me, You won't regret it. Definitely.
And
won't
he
regret
did
it.
that one with no budget. So you got to just imagine what he's going to be able to do with, donations.
Exactly. No, congrats to Dominic. Congrats to you, Austin. Well done. As Austin said, he does all the graphics. Austin does everything for this show behind the scenes. So congratulations to you on that. That's a super cool thing to put your fingerprint on. And can't wait to see, obviously, what else you might have up your sleeve. You just never know, right? You never know. So
absolutely.
As I mentioned on this week's episode, we are going to be going into what is the difference between the novelization of Halloween Ends and the film that you see on the screen. Now, as I mentioned, we talked about it a lot with Marie last week on the show. It was her least favorite of the Halloween films, and we had some good back and forth on it. And I realized that, as I said on the show last week, I don't have a good my elevator pitch of why I like Halloween Ends so much. And it was like, well, you know what? I got to do a little bit more digging. And I'm not sure that this is necessarily going to change anybody's minds if they're not interested in watching Halloween Ends or seeing it again for a second time. But it does add a little bit more to the story. So there's going to be a lot of myself reading or trying to read. It's something that I struggle with. I have since I was, 5 years old. So please bear with me tonight as I mumble and fumble my way through what is written. But I do want to give a shout out real quick to Aaron Estrada, who follows us on Instagram. Aaron actually sent me a link to a Reddit page, and I'm getting all of this information from the Reddit page. So I have not had the opportunity yet to read the entire novel, the Halloween Ends novelization. But Aaron sent me this link, and it was actually, I'm going to give another shout out to, I want to make sure I get his name right, Alex Sobecki. He was the Reddit user who created this list. I am going to be reading probably maybe 50% of what Alex wrote. So credit to him. I did not do this research. I did not do this homework, but I thought it was really fascinating. So we're going to talk about it tonight. But if you want to read the whole list, go to Halloween Movies on Reddit and check out Alex Sobecki. And he did this whole write-up. Very, very cool to see that. And, we'll obviously hopefully get more, take this, do this again with some of the other films that have come out. But dude, we're going to get right into it because this is going to be a little bit of a longer episode. We won't necessarily stop and talk about each individual point because some of them are just very simple, whatever, right? I mean, there's not really a whole lot to chat about, but it kind of follows, obviously, the film, and we're going to go somewhat in order. Like I said, if you want to read the whole list, go check out that. What is, I'm not a Reddit guy, but like, is that like a forum? I mean, what is that? Like what is it?
Dude, I'm 26 and I feel like I'm too old for Reddit sometimes. It took me a while to figure out. There are people on Discord also, and Discord is like a whole other, I'm just not learning that one. That's just not happening. Reddit is like, think of it as like if Yahoo, Jesus, now we're both sounding old. If Yahoo knew like the web page was like only shit you cared about. Okay. That's the only way I could describe it, is stuff. Also, we do have to mention there are going to be some special announcements.
Ooh, thank you. I almost forgot about that. And that was something you and I just talked about like 3 minutes ago, and it just goes to show how quickly I forget about things. Yes, we have some announcements to make at the end of the show. Some very, very cool announcements that if you're a fan of the show, you're going to want to stick around to hear what we have to say. So don't change that dial. Don't change that radio station. Don't change that YouTube channel. We've got some very cool announcements that are going to be coming up. So thank you for that reminder. Yes. And let's get into the Halloween Ends novelization, shall we?
Let's do it. I've done just enough to crease the front page or the front cover of this, but haven't read. Like you said, it's tough for us.
I used to do that in high school all the time. Make it look like I was actually reading something. You just like crease the cover and be like, I swear I've read like 17 chapters of this thing. Look at it. It's beat up. The book has been damaged, Just
bend the spine of it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. All right. So let's get into it. So we the first thing that I'm going to mention here is that the prologue of the novelization is November 1st, 2018, rather than Corey's opening scene. So we're back at that scene basically at 2018. Allison is put into an ambulance and learns that her mom was just killed as the doors close. So that is how the prologue starts. So we obviously don't see that in Halloween Ends, where Allison's loaded up and at the same time she's being told, hey, your mom just got killed. You would think that she would have started to wonder where her mom went to. Her mom obviously left the steps, went upstairs, and never came back. So I guess we're seeing a little bit of what that looks like. Now, this was a cool thing that I really liked about this this novelization, and they took a little bit of a deeper dive into what happened after the events of Halloween 2018 and kills, because they take place in the same night, and how Michael sort of escaped and what happened to him. And it goes into this story about two garbage men named Ozzy and Hugo encountered a wounded Michael, who kills both of them and steals their garbage truck to escape unnoticed. So who knew Michael could drive the big rigs? But he can. He's good. He's good at driving cars, and he can also drive garbage trucks, which is really impressive. But we're going to go back to these guys here in a little bit, I believe. But they're from the little bit of this book that I actually did read. This goes on for quite a while, like this whole scene, and this character Ozzy, him and his wife are talking about it, and like he was thinking about calling in sick from work, I think, or maybe his wife was trying to convince him. I don't remember, because of all the events that had happened that night. But they come across Michael, who's badly bleeding and injured, and he's in rough shape. But he kills them, and then he steals their garbage truck. So in Halloween Ends novelization, Laurie led a charge to find Michael after his disappearance, but it never led to anything, and she eventually gave up. So we get a little bit of that in the film, right? We know that she was obviously still very passionate about this and trying to find him, because she knew that he escaped. But we get a little bit more of that in the book, a little bit of a deeper dive to try to figure out exactly what Laurie's stance was after 2018 and the events of Halloween Kills. Sheriff Barker, who you and I have made fun of that character, I think it was just a really not a great casting for that role. Didn't really care for him much, but Sheriff Barker resigned, and a new sheriff, Nate Scott, took his place. Curfews, roadblocks, and National Guard were involved, but Michael still could not be found. So once again, getting a little bit of that backstory. I really like that. I think that I don't want to say we missed that, because they in some of the real quick scenes that we see of Laurie typing, you're getting some of those newspaper clippings and things like that, but they don't necessarily go into a real deep dive into what happened. But you would think, obviously, Michael Myers being back on the streets of Haddonfield, and then disappearing into the night, that would create a lot of panic and concern amongst the townspeople, right?
Yeah, and this just does more to kind of build up the paranoia that's in the town. We do, like you said, get a brief kind of like you see a lot of like Sheriff. What's the sheriff?
Barker?
No, sorry.
Hawkins. Yeah,
Hawkins going through, and you see a wound, a victim with a gunshot wound, and they're going, "Oh, that's not Michael." There, every sort of kill, every sort of crime is somehow questioned if this is Michael, and it does more to just build up Haddonfield in this state, which eventually gets to Corey.
The Myers home was demolished, and a community garden dedicated to all of his victims was made. It soon fell into disrepair, and is now basically a worshiping ground for Michael, worshiping ground to Michael for wayward teenagers who are interested in the macabre. I love this, dude. Like, I think that was a missed opportunity that even if they would have only shown in the film for just a brief 30-second clip of Laurie walking down the sidewalk, and here's where the Myers house once stood, and she has a flashback or whatever it might be, but to see it all falling apart, maybe there's some kids, dicking around or whatever. I think that was a missed opportunity. And I love that in the novelization, they went back and sort of revisited what happened to this character of the Myers house, which is something that we talked about, that the Myers house was a character in all of this. And we see that little newspaper clip in Halloween Ends where it says Myers house demolished or whatever it was. But you don't really know what the backstory is there. And I love this. I wish they would have stuck with this.
Yeah, I mean, the graveyard thing is really badass. And to anybody at home who's like, oh, that's not believable. Look up Bundy, Dahmer, any of those guys. They all had this like fan club, especially these like girls who wanted to marry him in prison. It's totally believable that people would be shrining to Michael Myers.
Right. The Corey Jeremy scene plays out relatively the same, but Jeremy is a lot crueler to Corey. He calls him poor, says he has no friends, etc. Corey is explained to have known the Allen family for about a half a year and had been doing the yard work for some extra cash. So we're just getting a little bit more of that backstory and the dynamic between the Allen family and Corey. Corey panics when he can't find Jeremy, and he is the one who calls the Allens to come back home. So sort of setting up that scene for what eventually happens when Jeremy falls to his death. Frank Hawkins was the one who suggested Laurie start writing about a year after Michael's massacre, as it had helped him come to terms with himself. She dismissed him as she was still feverishly hunting Michael at this point, basically cutting out all contact with most people besides those assisting her, which didn't include Frank. He was still in rehab for his injuries and had, quote unquote, moved past some of his darker impulses. So that is interesting. So let's just break that down just for a second. So number one, Frank is obviously, trying to convince her, hey, you need to write this book. We get a little bit more of that backstory, but that the really interesting part to me is the quote unquote moved past some of his darker impulses. What does that mean exactly?
Dude, yeah, that's what I'm wondering is like, am I forgetting something in 18 Kills regarding his darker impulses? Is that supposed to mean like he wants to throw down with Laurie? Is that what they mean?
I have no idea. I have no clue, but that's sort of an interesting thing. The Redditor who created this post made sure to put that in quotes, the quote unquote move past some of his darker impulses. Moving on. Allison had moved on at this point, as well as gets annoyed at Laurie's constant drunken calls in the middle of the night, trying to make sure Allison is safe. After a night where Allison basically threatens to cut Laurie off forever, she finally takes Lindsay Wallace, finally takes Lindsay's advice and goes to therapy, selling almost all of her guns and sobering up as well. So, seems like it's Allison who sort of pulled her in the direction, maybe more so that we got in Halloween Ends, where she's cleaned her act up, much more of a grandmother figure, if you will. I mean, still a very odd grandma at best. As we sort of talked about last week, says some really strange shit that I never heard our grandma say. I can tell you that much.
Oh, Jesus, no.
But it's so we get once again more of that backstory of what's going on. While Allison had moved on, she has extreme depression and has become numb to the world. And this is another quote, life had become something to endure rather than experience. She also doesn't believe Laurie has fully moved on from Michael, even after the 3 years of therapy and sobriety. So very concerned that her grandma has not moved on and that she's still seeing things going on, whatever it might be. Allison describes her situation in the same way as Corey. She feels suffocated in her home and just wants to get away from Haddonfield and it all. But as she explains in the movie, she is afraid what Laurie would revert to if she does. So Allison wants out. Allison wants to get out of town, out of Dodge. And, we're seeing more of these parallels between what is going on with Allison behind the scenes, as well as maybe Corey. And once again, those parallels that we're getting with this. Doug Mullaney and Allison get together as he helped her feel safe after Michael's massacre. Laurie pushed them together as she thought Allison being around a police officer would make her feel safer. So let's talk about Doug Mullaney for a second. Once again, the actor was great. I don't have any problem with the actor, right? Just felt like it was a little miscast because Doug legit looks like he's like a 47-year-old dude, and Allison would be 21, 22 at this point, whatever, right? So didn't really understand that. Like, they should have gone for a younger actor, and I might have understood it more. And I have no idea how old that guy is, but he looked much, much older than Allison appears in that film.
Definitely. Is he in Kills, or am I making that up?
Well, the Mullaneys are talked about, like those three shithead kids are like, you don't fuck with the Mullaneys or whatever. So yes. I don't know if one of those kids is supposed to be him, because if that's the case, he's even older. Like, that dude is like fucking 58 years old or whatever. He would be way older. But I have no idea. I'm not sure. But they do reference the Mullaneys in Halloween Kills, to your point.
Okay.
Cameron, so we're going back to Cameron, who was Allison's boyfriend in Halloween 2018, and then they have their whole deal and breakup or whatever. But Cameron's mom blames Allison for Cameron's death, saying they should have called the police instead of thinking they could handle Michael alone. I could understand that as like a parent going, hey, why didn't you guys just call the cops? Why'd you think you were going to be the people to stop this dude? But so apparently Allison is being blamed for Cameron's death by the mom.
Wasn't Cameron's dad the one driving them around?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah, I mean, good point, right? Why was Lonnie not maybe being blamed more since it was his own dad? I don't know. But
whatever.
So the book talks a little bit more about that Allison was being blamed more for Cameron's death. The town of Haddonfield had started to spread the rumor of, I like this one. Okay. The town of Haddonfield had started to spread the rumor of the cult of Samhain, the cult of Samhain, which they believed would summon a boogeyman every Halloween to kill in order to appease an evil god. They believed Michael Myers wasn't a human, but rather a supernatural force that infects whoever the cult desires to carry out their bidding. Dude, that got deep, right? That got deep. Yeah, let's talk about that one for a second, because that one's pretty interesting.
Well, what I really like about it is in 2018 they go, wasn't Michael Myers Laurie's brother? And Allison goes, no, that's just something people made up to make him feel better. And now it's like the Cult of Thorn, or in this case Samhain, which is kind of tying together like the Halloween 2 with the 4, 5, and 6 movies, is kind of that same thing. I love that, and I wish there would have been just one line about that in the movie, because that was one of my favorite parts about, not my favorite parts, but something I really liked in 2018 is that they acknowledged these sequels and said that didn't happen.
Exactly. I agree. I think this is cool. Like it didn't go anywhere, but it was just this talk of what was happening behind the scenes. And I don't know that I would have ever necessarily expected this to be an ends like the film, because it would have just been a really weird loose end that you would have never been able to tie up in this, because, clearly that was not the direction they were going here. But because this writer has more liberty to tell a little bit more of this backstory and come up with this sort of creative, mind of what's happening here, I think it's awesome. Like, I think it's cool, because you would expect in a town like Haddonfield, where this crazy stuff just happened, that people would be like, dude, it's a cult, bro. It's a cult. There's like all this supernatural shit going on. And then you'd have other people that are like, he was crazy. He was a crazy kid. He should have been locked up. They should have kept, whatever, right? There would be all these people sharing their different opinions. And I just love that, they kind of reference this a little bit, and it gives a nod to the Cult of Thorn. I just think that's a super cool idea.
Yeah, I think him killing exclusively on Halloween, at this point, 3 different Halloweens makes people go, what's going on here? Is there something to do with Halloween? You do some Google search, you find Samhain.
Yep.
It does itself.
It makes sense. It makes total sense. Willie the Kid. So Willie the Kid is the DJ. Willie the Kid had been spreading over the radio that Corey was the latest of the cult's boogeymen, and that's why he killed Jeremy. So Willie the Kid kind of stirring the pot a little bit. We go back to Willie the Kid here in a little bit, and there's some other really cool things that are being said about Willie. Moving on, Allison has Julian as a patient before Laurie and Corey show up for Corey's hand wound. So going back to Julian, who we saw in 20, do we see him at the end of Halloween Ends? I feel like we do. I think we see him.
Yeah, he is part of the mob.
Okay. But Julian is the kid that was being babysat on Halloween night in 2018. Love that character. Love that kid. I don't know why he's not at age 45.
He is. He is at age 45. I'm almost positive, because I remember being like, oh, dude, I'm going to go meet Julian. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. I add him to my list then, too. That just cost me like $50 just finding out that information.
Funding his college.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Dr. Mathis. So Dr. Mathis is the doctor who Allison and Deb are reporting to. Dr. Mathis is Dr. Mathis is portrayed as even more of an asshole. He wrote a book about his quote unquote hunt for Michael Myers, inserting himself into the narrative just because Marcus, the male nurse killed by Michael in Halloween Kills, worked for him. So we saw, Marcus, and I forget what her name was. They were at the bar at the beginning, and then they ended up getting killed in the car with Marion Chambers. And the chick takes the round of the noggin when Michael kicks the door. So apparently Dr. Mathis is inserting himself way more into that whole story, which is kind of crazy. Once again, giving more backstory to all of this.
Yeah.
It's implied the only reason he hired, so Dr. Mathis still, it's implied the only reason he hired Allison is to quote unquote bolster his credentials in the Myers mythology.
Sure.
So he's a douchebag, right? He's
that's what I was gonna say.
And we know that. I mean, we saw that within Ends, what you get of Dr. Mathis. You know he's a douchebag, but so he's really trying to get in the middle of it. In the novelization, Laurie leaves the clinic with Corey's bike as a way to force Allison to give him a ride home and spend more time together. They get ice cream and bond. So not a whole lot there, but Laurie is the one really pushing that. Okay, back to Willie the Kid. Willie the Kid managed to get a hold of some of old Dr. Loomis audio logs from back when Michael was still at Smith's Grove and plays them over the radio. Loomis notes that Michael escaped his room for an hour on October 31st, 1984, and was found with white linen wrapped around his face. So this is obviously post 78, right? He's captured. He's back in Smith's Grove. And he escapes for an hour and is found with white linens wrapped around his face. Okay, kind of crazy cool to add that to the story, right? I mean,
it's a little H4 nod, but also kind of Rob Zombie. Like the dude is obsessed with having a mask on. I don't know. It's a cool tidbit. Sounds Michael Myers. That's the kind of like adding to the mythos that I'm okay with.
Right. Exactly. Loomis also worries that Michael's madness is becoming his own. So Loomis also worries that Michael's madness is becoming his own. Quote, "At night, I do not know who or what I am becoming, who or what I am," end quote. Claims he is no longer able to sleep, and when he looks into Michael's eyes, all he sees is death in the abyss. So we're getting a little bit more story with Dr. Loomis, a little bit more backstory that Dr. Loomis was still his doctor, and Michael was his patient even until the 80s. And I don't think they necessarily have acknowledged when Loomis died, but I would assume they probably would go by his real death, which was in, I believe, 96 or 95, 96, whatever that was. So yeah, very, very interesting story there. I thought that was kind of a cool tidbit.
Definitely.
Corey sneaks out of his house in the middle of the night and goes to the Allens' house. He goes to the attic and makes paper airplanes, throwing them down to the ground floor. He then climbs over the railing and debates suicide, a ritual he always performs when he returns to the house, and he can never manage to work up the nerve to let go. So we kind of get, once again, more backstory on Corey. The novelization gives backstory to the homeless man living in front of Michael's sewer. His name is Nelson Christopher, a nod to Christopher Nelson, which I think is cool. Yeah. And he was a fellow inmate at Smith's Grove that Dr. Sartain used to try and get Michael to react. Let me start that over. So his name is Nelson Christopher, and he was a fellow inmate at Smith's Grove that Dr. Sartain used to try and get Michael to react. So he used him in some way to try to get Michael to react. After all of the torture and abuse Sartain put him through, Nelson starts to see Michael as a god and pledged his devotion to him. A class action lawsuit against Smith's Grove forces them to release several other inmates. Nelson had nobody, so he becomes a drifter, and while collecting cans one day under an overpass, he senses the same feeling he felt back at Smith's Grove and realizes he has found his God once more, again pledging to serve him and bring him food and victims.
Jesus. I mean, it makes sense. That's pretty sweet, though.
Right.
The whole, like, go in there and get me his mask is, I guess, more important now. No, I like it.
Pretty interesting. I like hearing some of those backstories on characters that we did see that don't make a huge impact on the film, but obviously I do like the nod to Nelson Christopher. I think that's a great way to obviously that nod to Christopher Nelson, who did all the effects for the three films. Before the high schoolers can find Corey on the bridge after he leaves the party, he is once again contemplating suicide as he notices he still has Laurie's switchblade. So we have that scene where he's over the bridge where he eventually falls. Nelson is the one who drags Corey into Michael's cave in the novelization rather than Michael doing it himself. An extra scene of Laurie working on her memoir where she details her thoughts when she entered the Wallace house back in October on October 31st, 1978, and found her friends all dead and first encountered Michael. So we get a little bit more of a deeper dive and once again, her thoughts on that, which I think is kind of cool. Lori's mother grew tired of Lori's nightmares following Michael's attack and would frequently kick her out of the house to live with her aunt and uncle. Her father also started to be less of an active participant in the family and died 1 year after Halloween 1978 due to a heart attack, and Lori blames herself for causing that. So again, right? I mean, just more that we never heard. Lori was so convinced Michael would come back for her that she never bothered to move out of Haddonfield, as she knew he would find her anywhere she went. So I think this is sort of an interesting thing, because that was one of the things that one of the issues that I had with with 2018 was it was like, okay, you were this effed up from the events that happened to you 40 years earlier, and you couldn't be like, bitches, I'm going to Palm Springs.
Right.
I'm out of here. I ain't sticking around this joint. But she did, and she created this this freaking army base essentially that she rigs to burn down. Like, it's just crazy.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. I think it's something that I said last week is like, if you're gonna do all that, like, why wouldn't you just move out of Haddonfield like she does in Halloween H2O? No, I like that she just is paranoid enough that, he'll find me anywhere. But bro, have him find you in Honolulu.
Right, exactly. Yeah. If you got to pick a place to die, let's go someplace warm and nice, and you got some, ukuleles playing or something in the background. Don't stick around Haddonfield. What's there to see in Haddonfield?
No douchebag marching bands. Sorry, keep going.
Right. No, that's good. So she also details a time during the summer of 1982 where Loomis informed her that a patient of his, Carl Sorrow, had killed himself and 2 guards. Loomis had been making good progress with Carl, who suffered from schizophrenia. That was until Carl was moved close to Michael's cell and started to comment that he felt greater urges to his darker thoughts. Loomis noted Carl's condition made his mind open to evil, and being near Michael made his evil seep into Carl's mind. Carl's eyes also became similar to Michael's shortly before he killed himself and the guards. So we're getting a little bit of a, Corey's eyes change, right? When Michael and Corey have that moment, Corey's eyes change. And so we're referencing this a little bit with an incident that happened back in 1982 that Lori was made aware of, which is kind of cool.
For sure.
A flashback to November 1st, 2018 continues Michael's escape after he stole the garbage truck. So we're going back to this Ozzy character. He encounters a little girl in a cabin who was kidnapped and abused by her father after his ex-wife tried to keep her from him. Michael's evil seeps into her just as it did Carl, and she kills her father. Michael then hides in an abandoned meatpacking plant and survives off any animals he can find.
Okay, so we're diving heavily into the supernatural now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we are, we've talked about that, right? Like, you had 2018, Michael's a man, Halloween Kills, supernatural Michael, and then back to Ends, he's a man again. So now we're sort of, to your point, we're moving to supernatural Michael a little bit more. Thoughts?
I dislike that. I think it goes against what to me the new trilogy kind of means, where like they were kind of bringing him back to being, only the events of 78 happened, so he's just a regular dude. Right. I think that's scarier. I did a whole video on that a while back. But there's totally a time and a place for supernatural Michael. And one thing that I really dislike about this trilogy is that they teeter that edge and they don't leave it always up to your imagination. Like, I think Ends, the way the movie is, leaves it enough to your imagination, even though that scene with the eye, you could read it as supernatural very easily. And maybe that's what they intended. If this is what's in the novelization, I'm not a fan of it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the supernatural, there's a time and a place for supernatural Michael Myers, right? And we got that a little bit with, like, Halloween 6 was somewhat supernatural because of the whole cult thing, and I guess you could include 5 in on that a little bit. I'm not for or against it necessarily. I do like the Michael as a man story more. There's no question. I wouldn't be like totally opposed to it if they made a movie where not like the H4 sequel that we talked about a few weeks ago, where like Michael grew to 12 feet tall. I don't want to see that. But if you did have a film that crossed that line a little bit, where it was like pretty obvious, okay, there's some supernatural things going on here, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But I do have the love for the OG Michael, where he's just this 21-year-old kid who escaped the sanitarium, and he's off on this killing spree. Like, I do like that, right? Where there's a little bit more mystery to it. So I'm kind of on it, but I can live with it, right?
Cool.
Let's see. The closest we get to an explanation of what Michael's motive is, and here this is a quote. As police scoured the area, Michael sat waiting for the night when he could surface to kill again. On the holiday that had first inspired his murderous rampage. On a night when a man in a mask would draw no attention. A maniac with one desire, kill and feast on the fear of his victims. End quote. Says a lot. Wow. That's a lot right there. That's huge. So it was Michael knew. I mean, he was kind of like, as the cops were looking for him, he knew, according to this, that he was going to get caught, but that there would come another day where he would get out and he would start doing this over again.
So I think, like, to a degree, you watch the movies and a lot of that you can kind of infer by Michael's actions, but it is weird and feels wrong to hear it like explicitly stated. I don't know if that's like, if that makes sense, but like, I don't like hearing that, like, he knew that, like, this was the day he could walk around and look like it makes sense. Like, he knows it, but it's weird to kind of get even just a little bit into Michael's mind, like, narratively. I don't know. Right. It's weird for me, but I understand that they got a story to tell.
They do. And, once again, with the the novelization, you're going to get a lot more of that stuff, right? You have a lot more liberties, and somebody's got to fill in 250 pages of a book or whatever it is, right? So very interesting stuff. Circling back to the night of October 31st, 2018, a scene details the girl who Cameron kissed. So remember at the school dance, Cameron was kissing this girl. Yeah, the tiger girl. So Kimberly Hart was Cameron's ex, and she was trying to win him back from Allison. After the kiss and Cameron leaving to go after Allison, Kim was walking back home when Ryan Cooper pulls up to her in his car. He was a year ahead of her and had returned back from college to Haddonfield to figure things out. So I'm not sure if he's alluding at like they had been together or something, but says to figure things out. They hit it off, and rather than dropping Kim at home, he takes her to the meatpacking plant. Great idea, dude. Solid effort, right? You're going to try to score. Let's take some chick to a meatpacking plant, which is kind of funny in itself.
Well, yeah, I was going to say there's an entendre there.
Yeah, there was some meatpacking he was trying to take care of. So he takes her to the meatpacking plant, and they hang out there for hours, but leave before Michael shows up the following day. So you kind of are like, oh, dude, these two kids are going to get whacked. They don't. Michael shows up after that, and that's when he lives there, apparently. Flash forward to October 31st, 2019. Kim and Ryan go back to the meatpacking plant to celebrate their 1-year anniversary at the spot they fell in love, meatpacking plant. I mean, If there's any single dudes out there right now and you're looking for a place to take your girl, the meatpacking plant apparently is the place to do it. Michael is still residing there and starts to toy with them by dropping Ozzy's decayed. So Ozzy, the garbage truck guy, the garbage man, by dropping Ozzy's decayed corpse in front of their car and then hunts them inside the plant. He kills Ryan by impaling him on a meat hook, and Kim attempts a final girl circuit to escape Michael. I don't know what that means. She eventually arrives under the overpass and goes into the sewer, hoping to lose Michael in there. He tracks her down, but jams a steel bar into his arm before I'm sorry. Okay. So this is reading thing. This whole reading thing is tough, right? So he tracks her down, but she jams a steel bar into his arm before he rips it out and drives it into her spine. The stab Kim managed to get on Michael's arm causes it to go limp. So Michael's got like a dead arm in this movie. I don't know. But they go back to the meatpacking plant to confess their love to one another for their 1-year anniversary, and they both get murdered. Did you have something?
No, I was just going to say there's like enough here for, and I know that all three movies were originally going to take place on the same night. Feels like there's enough here for that third movie.
For sure. Yep, absolutely. And that's kind of what I think is cool. Like, obviously, we never saw this on the screen, but in your own mind, you can picture this as if they had made another movie, maybe some of this stuff would have been it. Let's see. So this is around the point where Nelson is really. Oh, so there must be something that I missed here. But Nelson was released from Smith's Grove and discovers the same underpass. Okay, so sorry. This is around the same point where Nelson is released from Smith's Grove and discovers the same underpass, pledging to serve Michael. On October 31st, 2020, Nelson finds a hitchhiker named Meredith and knocks her out and places her in the sewer for Michael so that he can get a kill on Halloween. So I think, and I don't know this for a fact because I don't remember what the girl's name is, but you see there's like a missing, I don't remember if it's Meredith or not. For some reason, I think it is. I don't know.
It is.
Yeah. So we get a little bit of that backstory, which is kind of cool. So we know that because clearly that was what the filmmakers were trying to sort of give a nod to, was that there were other people that had still gotten missing, whatever. So, okay, this gets weird and fucking dark. So afterwards, Michael is cleaning the bones of Meredith, implying he maybe ate her. And looking into his reflection in the water, where we are told what he sees and reflects on when he looks at himself. The memories of his first kill. It's also implied that he hears the word kill inside his head constantly, or at least that's the only command he feels is necessary to him. So he's hearing the word kill, and he's you're sort of going into the mind, I guess, of Michael Myers at this point, as he's cleaning her bones.
Very, very Jason Voorhees to me. I mean, literally like the kill.
Right.
You know, like it's, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I'm not a fan of that at all, but I'm glad they didn't put that in the movie.
Kill, Michael. Kill, Michael. Nelson continues to help Michael by feeding him whatever he can find, be it animals or actual food. On October 31st, 2021, Michael knocks out 2 more teenagers and gives them to Michael. So this Nelson dude, he's got a hard on for Michael, and he's like worshiping this dude and basically in a way feeding Michael both literally and figuratively as far as his desire to kill goes.
Yeah, no, Nelson's honestly like an MVP, most valuable predator, but he's killing it, literally.
Right, literally. Corey explores the cave more before finding Michael and comes across, quote unquote, a significant collection of human remains. There were bones picked clean and bones that still had meat and hair attached. So Michael's still been killing plenty. Michael forced this is a quote here. Michael forced Corey's gaze into the dark eyes behind his mask, opening his mind to the essence of pure evil. So we get this in the film. We see this whole thing. Once again, another quote. Michael's head tilted as he studied Corey's fearless expression. He squeezed Corey's throat tighter. It had no effect on Corey's demeanor, and Corey absorbed the darkness. So we get a little less, I guess, struggle in the novelization than we did in the film, because in the film, Corey is trying to get away. But then I think there's like this moment where he's like, his eyes are locked into Michael's and he knows he can't get away. And that's when you get this whole like weird, evil exchange. But apparently Corey was just like, come at me, bro. Come at me, bro. When Nelson threatens Corey with Laurie's pocket knife, quote unquote, Corey didn't feel dread or fear. He didn't feel anything but one desire. Kill. And so Corey at this point was like, some sort of possession, whatever. And he became the pseudo Michael Myers, if you will. After seeing Corey and noticing his eyes have changed, Laurie continues her memoir and talks about how she regrets treating Michael like a man in a mask when she first saw him watching her rather than the threat he actually was. Maybe things would have been different if she had. On the way to show Allison the Allen's home, Corey has them cut through the community garden where the Myers house once sat. Allison notes how decayed and ramshackle it now looks, quote unquote, on the plot of land where evil lived, life struggled to grow. So kind of cool. I mean, I love this idea. I love the idea that the town I think Laurie technically buys the house. I think at some point in this, it talks about that Laurie buys the Myers house and has it demolished, but then the town does this memorial garden. I love that idea. I think it's great. It gives a backstory to what happened in the Myers house, since it was such a prominent quote unquote character in Halloween Kills. I love that.
Yeah, I think like life not growing, or like plants, gardens, grass, whatever, not growing on that land,
right,
is my level of like subtle supernatural. Like I would have loved seeing that in the movie, because it's not explicit. Like there's a voice that was in Michael's head that's now in
right.
Corey's head. I like
right.
that it's just like, I don't know, there's not grass there anymore.
Yep, I agree. So Corey debates telling Allison the truth about seeing Michael in the sewer, but decides not to tell her as it was frightening her away. After he shares the story about what happened with Jeremy, Allison confesses she feels Karen died because of her. Had she just listened to her mother and stayed at the hospital, many people would be alive, but she wanted revenge for her father and wanted to kill Michael herself. When Doug reaches the tent that contains Nelson's body, it is noted that his face has been carved like a smiling pumpkin. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
An explanation of why Michael likes to look into someone's eyes before killing them. Quote, Michael pulled him closer so that his black eyes could consume Doug's terror. So Michael is consuming the terror as he's killing or just before he kills. And in a way, or in essence, that is feeding him. Allison and Corey start getting intimate on the couch before moving upstairs, and Allison seems obsessed with seeing if Corey can feel any pain, from touching his wounds to biting him to eventually pushing her thumb into the stitches on his hand wound. This only brings more pleasure to Corey rather than pain. So interesting that they started, kind of make it out and doing their thing on the couch and then go upstairs, because they're very reminiscent of Judith Myers and what we see in 1978. But Allison's into some crazy shit.
Yeah,
we would have never known. Yeah, she's getting crazy. Allison confesses to Corey that she has been having nightmares about killing Lori with the knife she used to stab Michael, and that she feels no emotion about it. So this is a much darker film, just in general, a much darker version of what this film could have been if they had gone with this novelization. But there's a lot of residual or after effects of what happened, obviously, on Halloween night 2018, that a lot of people are still feeling, obviously, including Allison at this point. Trick-or-treating now happens during the broad daylight in Haddonfield, as many believe the boogeyman only comes out at night. When Corey confronts Michael for the mask, he demands to know what Michael did to him. While they struggle, Corey notes that Michael's black eyes have no effect on him this time. He manages to get Michael to lose his balance and then slams Michael's head repeatedly into the ground until he stops fighting back. Corey takes the mask and looks at it, feeling a frightening calm over him. So very kind of similar to what we see in the film, just with a little bit more detail. Still don't like it. Not a fan of somebody stealing Michael's mask, no matter how it shakes out. An additional scene happens with the high schoolers before they go out and Corey finds them. It is revealed that Terry, his last name is Tramer. Ben Tramer is his grandfather. Terry's father, Robert Tramer, is verbally and physically abusive to him and resents the path his son has chosen in life. Robert was a star linebacker in his high school days and hates that his son picked band of all things. So kind of cool. We're getting a little bit, some ties back to the 1978 film with the Ben Tramer character. It also, I'm pretty sure, isn't it Ben Tramer in Halloween 2 that takes the fucking car to he gets smoked by the car? Like, is that Ben Tramer? Yeah. So Ben Tramer, obviously forgetting everything that happened in Halloween 2, as we know, didn't happen in the David Gordon Green trilogy, but Ben Tramer lives, and apparently Terry is his grandson. So Willie the Kid tries to tell his listeners that the real Michael Myers is in his studio and about to kill him, but anyone listening probably assumes it's just a joke. I kind of like that, right? Because that would make sense. Seem very obsessed with Michael. What do you think about that? I kind of think that would have been a cool idea if he was like pleading and begging for his life over the air, and maybe you get a scene of people sitting in their car being like, "Yeah, right, this guy's full of it." Like, that'd been kind of cool.
Well, and it's kind of, you get like a War of the Worlds kind of thing. I mean, the guy was very much talking about like the conspiracy theories and different kind of creepy stuff on the radio, that him kind of playing a story over the night of Halloween checks out. I mean, I would expect it. Yeah,
exactly. A group of seventh graders has made Michael Myers outfits and went to the community garden where his house once stood. They wanted to try and perform a ritual to summon Michael so he could help them get revenge on some bullies. After their ritual, Michael does indeed show up and stands in the area where his childhood bedroom once was, observing the masks on the children to see if any were his own. The police arrive and tell the kids to get home as it's past curfew. The kids say Michael is there, but he had already departed by the time they turned back to his previous location. So kind of cool. Once again,
I love that scene.
Yeah, dude. I that was such a missed opportunity in my mind, and I don't know why I'm so like obsessed with like the Myers house, but I just think there was so much there, and that's why I loved the part that I loved in Kills the most was the Big John, Little John, because it just gave more of that backstory on what had happened in that house, and it had been returned and put back as part of the community, and tried to forget some of the bad stuff that had happened there, but obviously it's brought back to life in Halloween Kills, and they end up getting it knocked down on Halloween Ends. But this next one is a quote: "As Michael retrieved Corey's knife, Corey shot back." So we're at the final scene at this point. Quote: "As Michael retrieved Corey's knife, Corey shot back to life. Blood vomited out of his mouth as he cowered with terror at the shape above. Michael wrapped his fingers around Corey's neck and gazed into Corey's bleeding eyes, taking back the evil he had passed. Flashes of his bloody violence appeared within the glassy reflection of Corey's horrified eyes. All of it came back to him: the fear, the blood, the death. Michael's blank eyes darkened as he placed his hand on Corey's head. With a swift and muscular movement, he snapped Corey's slit neck in two. Then he slipped back into the darkness." So just a little bit more detail on, kind of Michael being like, "Hey, I'm the guy," right? Like, as we talked about it last week with Marie, like he's the guy, right? He's not going to dick around. Corey is just this, wannabe, if you will. So we get a little bit more detail on that. After Michael, so once again, we're at the final end scene here. After Michael is pinned by both hands to the kitchen island, the knife Laurie grabs out of the drawer and stabs into him is the same one that Allison had used to stab Michael back on October 31st, 2018. They would have never really been able to do that, I don't think, in the real film, because how would you have known that, right?
Yeah, it's just kind of too small of a level of detail to like say in a movie. It would be too much, I guess.
Right. Exactly. When Michael grabbed Laurie's throat, quote, "Laurie resisted his pull, and then she surrendered to his power. Her eyes lost their expression as they began to blacken like his, as she absorbed his darkness." Okay, so we're seeing here, and spoiler warning, the book ends differently than the film does. And we're going to get into that here in just a little bit. Two police officers, Richard Wright and Brody Decor, hear over the radio that Michael Myers is killed and race to Laurie's house to see the truth. They had just left Dr. Mathis's home, where they discovered him and Deb. They come to Laurie's just in time to see them strapping Michael to the roof of Allison's car. So we're Michael has been killed at this point. It's interesting that you obviously have the same two cops that had discovered Mathis and Deb are now getting this report that, and I guess I don't know this because I haven't read the book. I'm just reading the notes here, but Laurie is the one in the film to call and say, "Hey, I want to report a suicide," and she gives her address and hangs up. So this talks about that they hear a radio that Michael Myers had been killed. That's what, and maybe I read that wrong.
Sure.
So two police officers, Richard Wright and Brody Decor, hear over the radio that Michael Myers had been killed and race to Laurie's house to see the truth. Okay, so maybe I screwed that one up. But that's kind of cool. Like they get there and then they're like, "Well, somebody's strapping a dead body to the roof of this car. Should we do something about this?" And then obviously you must get this whole this whole deal where the sheriff talks about, "Hey, we're going to let it slide tonight," or whatever. So kind of interesting tidbit. The epilogue takes place on November 11th, 2022. Allison had been staying with Lindsay since Laurie's house was still a crime scene. Even once it was clear, Allison couldn't return to it. She knew she just had to pack up and leave to wherever the road took her. So we get a little bit more backstory here. Two more bullet points, and this is where we're going to have some discussion. So this is how the book ends. When Frank shows up at Laurie's with the vegetable bouquet, Laurie doesn't join him on the porch, but rather retreats inside and locks the door. It is implied that Michael's evil had been passed to her during the final glance, a parting gift from him. She also deletes her entire memoir after typing the final sentence about evil changing shape. The final line of the novelization says, quote, "Inside Laurie's office, his mask rested on her coffee table, waiting for its new shape." So, for those of you who don't know, in the novelization obviously still follows the same direction. The original ending to Halloween Ends was that Laurie takes on the persona of the shape and she becomes the shape, and she essentially is possessed, quote unquote, much like Corey was. What do you feel? I mean, do you like the ending as we saw it in the film? Would you have liked to have seen this other ending? Where do you stand with that?
I think, one of the big arguments that people have against Halloween Ends is that, there was kind of a bait and switch where we were marketed this concluding chapter that would tie all the loose knots. And then we were kind of sold this other movie. Right. I think this would further that argument if, we just opened it up and, I guess, Laurie is the shape. I have a huge problem with Michael being Pennywise in this novelization, feasting on the fear of those he comes in contact with, and the ability to just at a whim send those powers to other people, but then also take them back. It's very, Michael's almost like an evil wizard right. in this book. And I'm not about it. That being said, I think there was a subtle way to do this if he wanted to do sort of a, what's going on with Laurie. Right. and that could have been done with just like a lingering shot at some point. Where, the story does still feel resolved, but there's something weird. Just to kind of like give a last scare. I don't think, even if that was the way the movie ended, that there was any chance Jamie Lee Curtis was coming back to do another Halloween film. I think she is done with a capital D and a period at the end with this franchise. But what do you think, man?
Yeah, I mean, I'm much happier with how the film ends than how this book would have ended, because to your point, there would have been these loose ends that we would have never really gotten a resolution to. So, I mean, Ends, as we've talked about, Ends is the end. I mean, Ends ended it, right? At least this storyline. And, you can't, if they would have done something like this, if they would have presented this idea that Laurie was now possessed, you would have gone away from that film going, well, we need to get answers to this. We want more. And like, to your point, Jamie Lee Curtis is done. She is never going to come back. I would bet my next year's worth of paychecks she is never going to come back to this franchise again in any capacity, not even in a cameo role. She is done. So we would have never really gotten a resolution to that. And I wouldn't have liked that, because there are enough loose ends that have never been tied up that it would be, adding this, I think, would have, for those of us who did like Halloween Ends, to me, that would have been a black mark on this film, and I probably would not have liked it as much as I do. So yeah, I tend to agree with you. I also agree that I think, as we mentioned, it's a novelization. There's a lot more detail that they can go into, but you said it perfectly. I don't want a Michael Myers Pennywise, combo, right? I don't like that idea that there's this something else going on there, and that we're getting such a deep dive into, Michael's brain and what's happening. And like, I don't want to know what's happening inside of his brain. I don't want to know. I just want him to know, or I just want to know that he's this killing machine who really, he has no feelings, right? No emotions. He's just completely expressionless and completely like neutral. He's just a killing machine. And this obviously takes that in a totally different direction. So yeah, cool to hear some of these ideas. Very interesting to sort of imagine them in your own head. But as a fan of Halloween Ends, I like Halloween Ends the way that it is. Could have used a few of the little nuggets that they gave, would have been cool, but I would not have necessarily wanted to see this version of the film.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, man. There are some really cool kind of expansions of the very minor characters. There's a better kind of conclusion to what happened at the end of Kills. and leading into this film. But for the most part, man, I do enjoy being able to watch ends and not have an explicit, reason. If you watch 78-18 kills and ends, you don't get that explicit reasoning from Michael.
Right.
If you can look past that eye scene as I do when I watch it between Michael and Corey, it still remains that Michael is just a man. There are sort of legends that he transcends as he kills, but at the end of the day, he's just a dude with nothing going on in his brain but to kill. And I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm cool with the version of ends that we got. So that's it. If you guys want to read more, there was a whole bunch more that I didn't leave out. These were kind of like the big ones that at least hit home with me as I was reading through this. But check out Alex Sobecki on Reddit. And once again, thank you to Aaron Estrada for passing that on. It was a great idea for a show, and we had to take him up on it. So very cool. We'll try to research, see if there's anything else out there for any of the other books that have been written throughout the entire franchise, and talk about some of the differences, because it is kind of cool to see just some of the differences that we could have maybe had if they had used some of these liberties that these authors took. So very cool stuff. We are at the end of the show, but we do have a couple announcements that we want to make before we go. I think the first one is, I'm going to just say this, is that we are, surprise, we are going to be doing another live show Friday, October 13th at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can join us for another live episode of Halloween Lives, the podcast of Michael Myers. If you guys sat in on our last live show, it was a lot of fun. If you guys want to sit in on this one, make sure you hit us up on Instagram. Go to @halloween.lives.podcast. Send us a message, a direct message on Instagram, and let us know that you'd like to be a part of the show. We'll get you on the show. We'll chat. We'll talk. We'll have some laughs, whatever it is. And we'll send you the link to that show so that you can participate in the show. If you want to just listen, we'll be on YouTube, and you'll be able to see it live streaming here. But October 13th, Friday, October 13th, it's the only Friday, October 13th that I can remember in several years at least. But Friday, October 13th, we're doing our next live show. And God dang it, we want you guys to be there. So make sure you tune in. We'll be pumping that obviously on Instagram. And the show has moved forward. But yeah, if you guys want to be on the show, hit us up on Instagram, let us know. We'll be happy to send you that link and get you on the list to participate. And then last but not least, and I did want to mention, we are officially 50 days from Halloween as of the recording of this episode, and 19 days away from Halloween 45 Years of Terror, the convention that's happening out in LA at the end of September. You and I are going to have some cool shirts that we're going to be wearing out there representing the podcast. And we thought, man, what better way to help spread the word of our podcast than to also let any fans of the show have the opportunity to get these t-shirts for themselves. So once again, Austin, being the creative mastermind and genius that he is behind the show, he came up with this awesome t-shirt design. We're going to throw it up there right now. Guys, if you want to get a copy or a t-shirt of your own to help support the podcast, the link is going to be down below. Make sure you follow that link. Get yourself one of these t-shirts. It's a super cool design. It's super. I mean, it encapsulates everything that Halloween Lives. It's got Michael. It's got the glowing lives. I mean, it's got our pumpkin. It's got everything, right? We are the podcast of Michael Myers. It says it right on that t-shirt. Very cool t-shirt design. Fell in love with it the second Austin showed it to me. So we are going to be wearing those out at Halloween 45 Years of Terror convention. If you guys are going to be out there, you'll probably see us in them doing a little self-promotion while we're out there. But like I said, if you guys would like to get a t-shirt yourself, you can do so. Follow that link down below. It'll take you directly to that. And obviously, all of that money will go back and support the podcast and keep us moving down the road. So that's going to do it for episode number 36. We don't know if we convinced you that Halloween Ends is a good film or not. We might have made it worse for all I know. But at the end
it made it worse for me, man.
Oh,
it made it.
We're going the wrong direction. Guys, this is episode number 36. I'm Blaine Duncan. That is my brother, Austin. That's going to do it for this week. We'll be back next week with episode number 37. As usual, we can't wait to see you guys then. And obviously, make sure you guys subscribe, like, follow, do everything you can to support this podcast. And we are very humble and grateful and appreciative of any support you give us. That'll do it. I'm Blaine Duncan. That's my brother, Austin. We'll see you guys next week.